And here we are. This is Pete, and I have my lovely friend Alice on the other end, and we are going to share our wisdom of life. And today's topic is what?
Ebb and flow.
The
And
ebb
sometimes,
and flow.
Peter, sometimes lack of wisdom.
Oh my gosh.
Sometimes
Well,
lack of wisdom.
well, Alice, that might be the ebb of the flow then. You might have just hit the nail on the head.
Well,
Or
I mean,
wisdom and lack of wisdom. That's a good one.
yeah, wisdom and lack of wisdom.
That's great. There you go. Which one are you? Oh my
Well,
God.
oh my gosh, you know what's great? I'm happy with myself when I'm either one. Now, when I was young, I always wanted to be the wisdom side. But now that I'm older, I like being the lack of wisdom.
There you go. There you go.
I just like to
Well,
be flighty and funny and happy and goofy and not
and
worried
be
about being wise.
right, being yourself and being happy with yourself. Alice, it's truly a huge accomplishment to be happy with yourself. I take this from watching, what little I skim off the top of any news, but celebrity news, People magazine, this kind of stuff. Like I say, these people that are our icons, that are so successful in the field of entertainment, and yet they're out there with their struggles. You know, they're having struggles, and one of those struggles is being happy with themselves. They can
It is.
they can play
It
a
really is. And being content with yourself.
right, and
Getting to know yourself.
boy, you're hitting all the big. That's all
You've
that
got to
truth.
get to know yourself. And it's taken me years to do that. But one day I thought, I am kind of fun to be with. And that was like a real revelation for me. I'm not fun all the time. I know that, but it's wonderful when you realize who you are and you are comfortable with yourself and you're happy with yourself and you enjoy yourself.
And all that's so true, and all that is also very true. That to some extent you have to kind of mature into that through experiences in life, because like our topic the last time was validation, and we had 8 excerpts, but the ebb and flow is part of that. The ebb and flow, I think what you're saying, if help me if I'm wrong, but or clarify it, because we're saying that nothing lasts forever, which is another kind of flippant kind of almost thing to say. But when you're going through tough times, I think it's very good and helpful and useful to know that this won't last, that somehow you will get through it. And I think that's what we were talking about, the ebb and flow. Sometimes when you get depressed or down or feeling bad, part of that is, oh my God, I'll never get through this. Never, life will never be good again. But a lot of times, if you hold on long enough, it does. And
And you know what?
go
You know
ahead.
what just hit me?
Yeah.
I've never cared for the expression, this too shall pass.
Right, right, right,
The first time I ever heard it, it was in relation to a couple I knew their son had passed away.
right.
And it just didn't work for me.
It sounds flippant, and that's
Yeah, and I think the ebb and flow takes you to the ocean, and
right,
I don't know I don't want to be flippant and say, okay, Peter, this is going to pass. Just
right,
get over it.
right.
I think it has that undertone of get over it.
You're so right,
Hurry up.
Alice.
This is going to pass. Move on over next. Well, you know what? That's not healthy, I don't think. I think you need to go through it your own way, at your own pace, and go through that ebb and flow on your own. But however, I'm saying this, that's not true for everyone. Some people may find that expression very comforting. It's just I don't.
Well, yeah, it's like everything. It depends on who says it, how they say it, and the context and everything. But just off the top of my head, and there you go with another cliche. It sounds that I chose that word flippant, but I think if you're comforting somebody and trying to help them through it, and there is somebody on your list there we're specifically thinking about, but I think sadness, this is kind of how I'm seeing it as well. You kind of just have to feel what you're feeling and really allow yourself to feel it. But then, as you allow yourself that freedom, it does tend to lift. It does tend to move on, a little bit, or you learn to live with it in a certain way rather than letting it crush you.
Yes. And trying, okay, one thing that I've learned through time is if someone's hurting
Right,
and I'm uncomfortable around them while they're hurting,
right.
I need to remember that they need to process their feelings and I need to let them have that time to process their feelings. Even if it's a little awkward for me, it's a gift to them because it's not about me, it's about them.
Alice, again, I just have to tell you, your words of wisdom really truly are wisdom and so thoughtful and so meaningful because you really just said a very important thing right there that the sense when a person is hurting and your friends or whatever, but they don't want to impose their sadness on you. They don't want to, oh, I don't want, and the fact that you are supporting them and being supportive of them and allowing them to express their feelings, that does allow them to move through it. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean that you solve it for them or fix it or anything else, but you're not, Zeke, I'm yelling at my dog. Well, he, you talk about kids. This dog is my kid. Um, but anyway, again, I think you said it so well. You are there for them. And for them means literally being them there for them. And letting them express how they actually feel and not having to feel like they have to cover it up, you know, like that. But you were
And
also, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, and when I was younger
Right,
and someone was suffering, I wanted to make them happy
right.
because I thought that
Yes,
was what was the right thing to do. I just didn't know any better.
right,
And it's taken me decades. And that's the part of growing older that's so beautiful is you realize that you don't have to make, I guess looking back, we, we think or believe or our gut tells us that we should be happy, happy, joy, joy all the time.
right.
No, that's not the way life is.
No, right. And
And to become comfortable, because I used to feel awkward with people that were sad, and I wanted to make them happy so we could all rejoice and
right,
be
right,
fun. And then as you realize the gift you can give someone is just to listen to them
right.
and be their support for what they need, not what you want them to have.
Oh my gosh, Alice, you're so right on. That's so real and so true. Because like you said, we certainly want them to be happy, but wanting them to be happy, by telling them a joke or patting them on the back saying, you'll get through this, or, all things, this too shall pass, or whatever, those things can actually interrupt and prohibit the person from feeling or expressing their feelings, and it can delay sometimes, I think, what you actually want to happen. And I think, like you said, I do think it's a matter of age and wisdom, because I wouldn't blame you at all when you're look like you're saying, when I was younger I did this. No, that was who you were then, and that was perfect, that was great. But now you have a little bit different view and wisdom on the whole thing. And I'll throw in something that I've experienced with myself. First and foremost, I used to think old people. First off, that age, that what's old keeps shifting. For one thing, the older I get, the younger it is. But I didn't really think they had feelings. I didn't think I didn't think my old man gave a damn if I called him the old man. You know what I mean? I just figured he's a man. He's a grown up. He doesn't have feelings. Or let's say I don't think I felt that he was vulnerable to some stupid little kid making a remark. But now I realize, no, that's not true.
Yes.
As a senior citizen, I'm very sensitive to what other people say and think. I might have gotten, a little tougher skin, but I'm saying I have a better insight, I think, now with old people, or what we feel. Um, all right, since I'm on a roll, let me say something else. Okay, so I used to be scared of. I sound like um, Joe Pesci, but anyway, I used to be afraid of nursing homes and old people. It kind of spooked me, freaked me out. Now I'm starting, because of what I'm doing. I'm going in, I'm visiting people, and Alice, it's a whole new insight of, more or less, these are people too. Now there's certain people I can't approach or feel comfortable with, but in general, I think I'm broadening my horizon of who people are, and especially old people, 'cause since now that I'm one of them, and even there, I don't feel like I'm one of them, but yet and still, I kind of I do realize it. But going back to you, so what were you? Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to add, recently I've started saying older. I'm an older person.
Yeah, I hear
And
you.
in part, that's because I don't want to be old. And I had a conversation with one of my family members today, and they were pointing out how today a 60, no, a 75-year-old, 60-year-old person is not as many years ahead of a 50-year-old person as they were decades ago.
I see.
You know, it's, you know, there can, our culture today, I guess, with more acceptance and more thought about who we are, it's not just old, middle aged, and young,
Right.
it's older,
Yes.
middle aged, younger, and you can have like a 45-year-old and a 15-year-old that can get along fine. The generation gap is not as distinct as it was in Bye Bye Birdie.
You're so right again. You're so right again. Because, like you said, when we were growing up, from my perspective, we're kids, and even into our 20s,
Or
but
30s.
yeah, or even 30s, they're the parents. They're the parents. They're the grown-ups. And we felt like we were more or less reinventing or rediscovering everything, or discovering everything for the first time. We had no idea that our parents knew what sex was, or what we're doing sneaking out late at night, or anything. We thought that, their generation doesn't know crap. We're the ones that are cutting the rug. But, now you realize, your parents were people too, but there was more of a distinct difference between the generations,
There really
where
was. And
now I feel like I think what you're saying is we have like a little more in common, I think, is what we can talk about now.
I think so. And I don't know. It's it's interesting for us to kind of look into why it's that way now. I don't know why. It doesn't matter. However, it might be, unfortunately, so many of our things come from the media,
Well,
watching TV.
right.
And, you know, it's not Leave It to Beaver anymore,
No,
you
it
know.
isn't. And I watched. I
And I
found that.
love Leave It to
I
Beaver.
know. I found it, Alice. I found it. I purposely watched it just to see what it was like and so forth. And, because I remember growing up watching it. But it was interesting. And it was very, like you're saying, like we're kind of saying, the roles were very distinctive. The mother and father lived in their realm. But then they'd have to, deal with what Beaver got into trouble or whatever. Then you had Eddie Haskell, the smart ass, the wise guy. But
I loved
yeah,
Eddie.
oh yeah, I'm
Eddie
sure. Yeah,
Haskell's my
Eddie was
main
the
man. I
baby.
loved
He
him.
was the man. But
Well,
but
I showed some Eddie Haskell clips to my grandsons, and they were like, No, it just, it, I, I think there's for our, well, oh, I do know what I can say is my grandkids like to watch, um, Sheldon, The Big Bang
oh yeah,
Theory, and
yeah,
then all the other shows. And when you watch those, the adults are so different than they were in Leave It to Beaver.
right.
And that's kind of where I'm sure it's more complicated than that. And I need to do some research on it. But it's just, I think it's in a way good that there's less of a generation gap.
I think it's good. I think that's a little bit what we're saying, or a lot of what we're saying. I think there is a very distinctive generation gap when it comes to the tattoos and the piercings. I wondered when
Well,
when we
that's
were when
true.
we were growing our hair, I wondered what the next generation would do, and now I'm finding out. But I'm telling you, Alice, what I find out in that same process. I'm talking to a young lady with a nose piercing, and after I stop looking at that, she's a very polite and well-spoken young lady or young man or whatever. And so it always still impresses me because that was such a no-no, really an unknown, really, doing those kind of things in our
And
generation. But
and I have to say that I don't want to be an older person who says, "No, I would never do that." And I think that
right,
what you're saying is they're doing their own thing. We already had the long hair and
right,
whatever we had, but they are doing their own thing. And as long as they're not hurting their bodies
right,
or their souls,
right.
it's great. Well,
It
not
is.
great.
No, I get.
It's who they are. It's who
It's
they
who they
are.
are, and you're exactly right. Each generation has to distinguish itself and kind of send signals back and forth saying, hey, you're part of my generation and vice versa. And that's how they identify with each other. But I guess what I'm saying to you also is instead of it being offensive or however, like putting off that I would have thought it would have been. They're very polite, caring, well-spoken young people, and so
Exactly.
I enjoy talking with them and doing business with them or whatever we're doing, and so that's all I'm saying. Now, well, we can dwell on it too long, but I know when because when I watch these videos about the Beatles and stuff, they're being interviewed. That long hair, people just couldn't get over it. Oh my God, long hair, the world's coming to an end. You know, but now
And
now it looks so innocent.
I know. And my dad loved I Want to Hold Your Hand.
See? Wow.
It was so cool. My dad was and he loved the twist. He role modeled accepting youth.
That is great. That really is.
He role modeled accepting, and I didn't realize that till just now, but he, what, Dave and I took him with our kids downtown Asheville to this restaurant we'd heard about, and it was delicious. And so we come out of the restaurant, and Dad says, "Was our server a man or a woman?"
Uh-huh.
With no anger, Peter.
Right.
Right. He was just, he wanted to know.
Yeah.
It was that goth phase, the goth
Right. Yeah.
hair and everything. And I just never will forget. And because he was such a good role model for not being real judgmental, he didn't want people to hurt themselves or do unkind things to other people. But he was very accepting of who you were. At 97, he just, and I just, that will never leave my memory, I don't think, because he could have said something unkind, but he was just trying, he didn't understand it, Peter. He just didn't understand it.
I get it. I understand it. I hear what you're saying. And we've reached that 20-minute point, so I'm going to stop it and start it so we don't lose this. Okay. So I think you hit on a really great topic, Alice, as usually we do as we just start rolling. So I'm going to turn it off and then we're going to start it again.